View from the Gutters, episode 29. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss Marvel 1602, and to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 5301.
Yes, let's go.
You guys ready?
Welcome to View from the Gutters.
Yeah, keep talking your mic more for me.
Welcome to View from the Gutters, episode
That's
29.
Perfect as usual. I don't even know why I sound check, Cade. His voice is beautiful and sonorous. All right, welcome to the episode 29, View from the Gutters. We did it.
We did it. We made it. Wait, we haven't made it to. Is 30 something? We have 32.
No, I'm just saying we made it to 29.
Yeah, but this is episode 29.
We made it here. We
I'm
made
really,
it to right now.
I'm really surprised that I haven't committed homicide.
I'm surprised that any of us are alive, really.
That's true.
After
That's
knowing
true.
you, to be honest.
I know. I'm surprised as
My
well.
head definitely feels like it exploded.
And yet you're the one who seeks my company more than anybody else in this room.
Yeah,
That's
I
because
never talk
you're
to
so
you.
much fun to wind up.
What did we read this week? Marvel.
1602.
Oh wait, we didn't even introduce
yeah.
ourselves. We're just
He's Andrew
doing
Chard.
terrible tonight. I'm
No,
Andrew Chard.
it's you who's doing terrible.
I'm
You're
doing
fucking
fucking
it up.
horrible. I'm doing terrible. I was like gone for half the sound check. I was in a different room. How was I sound checking?
I don't know.
How did that happen? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't
I'm
know.
assuming that
Andrew
you're some
Chard.
kind of magic.
I'm
I'm
Joe
Andrew.
Preddy.
Yeah.
I'm Tobiah Panchin.
I'm Cade Reynolds.
And Eric Mannix.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
we got
we've
a
been-
new guy.
Yeah.
We've got Eric Mannix here. Who,
Matt volunteered to not show up so that we could record on a night that Eric could join us.
That's true. Well, he said that he could not show up tonight if we did it on a Thursday, but he understood if we wanted to get Mannix because he is a Marvel encyclopedia. And there we go, setting the bar really high for him so he feels nice and comfortable.
I felt really bad too. I did talk to Matt yesterday at the shop, and yeah, when you mentioned he wasn't going to be on, I was a little bummed out, but I was,
We'll get you both
highly
on
competitive.
At some
It's
point.
highly competitive.
yeah. But then I realized I get to be on and not him, so
You won.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
fifth
that's
seat
a
is in high demand.
That's
That
a
is.
win.
It is. The fifth seat is in very high demand.
Yeah, all
Especially
those
because
episodes. We
now
have
we-
4 seats.
We actually have an audience, maybe. Sort of.
Yeah.
We just got a syndication deal. We're now being featured on theouthousers.com, which is a really great news review satire, basically what we do here, but with more yelling.
Yes.
Website talking all about comics.
They have one of their favorite features they have right now is they have a counter similar to the one you would find in an industrial type job where it says it's been this many days since DC fucked up.
DC did something stupid.
And they just recently reset it today because DC has. I mean, I don't know about all the details but Kevin Maguire was going to do.
He was going to be doing the art on
Jail,
Justice League 3000, and he
with-
just got pulled off of it for no reason.
He was gonna be
because
doing
they're
it with-
massively retooling the comic and completely changing the concept.
Because he's working with Giffen and DeMatteis, who are both excellent writers and have written the Justice League before to amazing and sometimes hilarious effect, and DC can't have that. They need it to be grim and gritty and absolutely fucking retarded. I apologize if that word offends anybody, but
Yeah, I
let's
think
face
the
it, come on.
record that they set was 13 days. I think for
That's
days
astounding.
days without a fuck up.
It's
Yeah,
been about
since
2
the
weeks at the
new
max.
52, yeah.
Yeah.
13 days. I really have gotten to the point where, some people I think count sheep before they go to sleep at night, and some people have their rituals. My ritual is picturing editorial at DC on fire, and it's very calming to me because it means that the characters that I love are not completely fucked anymore. But
Yeah. Some people pray for the apocalypse. Joe prays for the DC apocalypse.
I don't know that a
Crisis on multiple editors.
crisis on.
That's
Oh god, it's Jeff Johns was just standing here and then his head exploded. We don't know why.
Well, it's Villains Month this month too, with all the different variants and things. That I'd love to see a Jim Lee variant.
that would be
this is
great.
a classic, DC villain Stan Didio.
I've been hearing that a lot of shop owners' heads have been exploding over the kerfuffle with the 3D motion covers And then they were like restricting how many people could get, but then they were offering 2D covers. Holy crap, background noise.
Oh, it's all good. You probably can't even hear that. I didn't
All
hear that. It'll be in there. There's a garage door opening nearby somewhere in the
Or it could be
Anyway,
the DC's private army coming to get us
Yeah, like
because they don't want the
You
truth
said
to
what
get-
about Dan Didio?
This whole Villains Month thing has just been a boondoggle, and it's like not even happened yet.
Yeah.
I feel they need to translate that word for some of our viewers that don't speak like 1920s English.
But
That would be a
boondoggle.
clusterfuck.
It's like a rhubarb.
It's like a rhubarb. It's like a kerfuffle. It's very similar to a kerfuffle.
It's not dissimilar from a kerfuffle.
I understand this.
You guys sometimes.
Okay.
I have no idea
So,
what you're talking about.
Joe, you recommended the book we're talking about. So what is
1602.
it?
Marvel
Tell us about-
1602.
Tell us about it.
Marvel 1602. It's basically Neil Gaiman, Andy Kubert, and I think Richard Isanove does the colors.
Yeah.
And basically, we were talking about this a little bit on the way up here because I carpool with several of the people here that are not charred.
Yay.
And we were talking about how only Neil Gaiman could have written this story. Really, it is the story of the Marvel Universe, and I can already tell Toby disagrees with me. It's the story of the Marvel Universe.
You just have
set
to open your mouth
400
and
years.
Toby disagrees
I know,
with you.
right? It's amazing.
It doesn't turn on or
It's
off.
seriously.
It's just always on.
I feel like Toby is like Obi-Wan Kenobi. He wakes up in the morning and he'll touch his forehead, and his brother, who he lives with, will be like, "What?" And he goes,
There's been a disturbance in the Joe.
"Joe's wrong." I feel like Joe's wrong about something. I don't know what, but
Let's
I
call
just
him.
feel it very strongly.
Let's call him and
Well,
see
this
what
is
he's
why I
thinking
have to
about.
ask your opinion first, so that I know how I can tell you you're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, but luckily my opinion is concrete, so
Is it?
I don't care. I'm an island as far as my opinions go.
You're immaculate
An
I
island
am
of
immaculate.
concrete.
in your wrongness.
In my rightness, anyways.
So what's the book about?
So the book is the Marvel Universe, and not the entire Marvel Universe, but a respectable portion of it, set like 400 years on the past. So it's 1602. It's not just a random assortment of numbers. They were,
Yeah.
But and basically all like everybody's favorites are there. You have Nick Fury as the Queen's head
Espionage.
intelligencer.
Yeah.
You've got Doctor Strange there as her doctor and
Mystical.
Well, I
advisor.
mean, all
Mystical
these characters
advisor.
are kind of fulfilling their archetypal roles
Just-
within the milieu of the Renaissance.
Absolutely. So you've got one of my favorite characters, and who I think they do a great job in this, Daredevil running around. You've got Peter Parker running around as like attaché to Nick Fury. You've got some really cool stuff going on in there.
Doom.
Otto the handsome Otto von Doom. So Dr. Doom is in here.
And
He's the Count of Von Doom in this, though.
Magneto is the head of the
as the
Spanish
head of the
Inquisition.
Spanish Inquisition.
And the Four of the Fantastic.
Yeah, the Fantastic Four. And it doesn't
It's basically all of the 60s.
Yeah,
Marvel
pretty much
characters, or
all
a good
of-
number of them.
Well,
I mean, there's a few who are missing. Iron Man. But I was
There's
actually
no-
reading
yeah.
the afterword that Gaiman wrote that's in the paperback collection. And he talks about how he wanted to kind of start at the beginning of the Marvel universe.
Right.
So it's the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, some of the Avengers.
Well, and he also talks about writing this in the aftermath of September 11 and not wanting to write a story about might makes right and guns and shooting. And so there's really not any of that in here.
Yeah, there's actually remarkably little action.
Yeah.
I would say combat. There's lots of action.
There's plenty of action, not a
Yes.
lot of combat. I would give you that.
That is what I meant.
And for a book that could be for what its subject matter is incredibly trite and kind of it could have been really bad. It could have been incredibly bad. I think all I have to say is Marvel Universe in the 1600s, and you go, oh, that's kind of a bad idea. But I think Gaiman nails it. He gives everybody a really satisfying kind of origin story, I guess. He does the X-Men are in this. He does them really, really well.
The X-Men are brilliant.
Yeah,
The whole concept of
really-
the witchbreed as mutants,
Yeah.
I think works incredibly well. And I think
And they stay solidly in that concept for the whole thing. There's no moment where it's we're not witchbreed, we're mutants. No,
Yeah.
it's always these abominations and stuff. And
when you see translations like this, there's often a tendency for certain things to seem shoehorned in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And no element of this ever feels shoehorned in. Like, it feels very natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is almost incredible. Like, you wouldn't think that would work, but Gaiman works it.
Yeah. It's just a good author staying very true to the roots and just like feel of these characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like in no way do they ever feel not like that character.
Yeah.
They are so recognizable that even if they don't have the same name or their name has been changed, they feel like that character. Nick Fury feels exactly like a 1600s Nick Fury. Stephen Strange is my favorite. This is my favorite incarnation.
I think this might be my favorite Nick Fury. There's something about him like running around in like the 1600s, just being like, the master spy. That really works. It really, really works.
Actually, a friend of mine just recently gave me 3 months worth of Netflix, and so I've been binging on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And the guy, I can't remember his name. It's like G.J. Wen something or other. The guy who does the voice of who plays General Martok in that series. Like, I was watching that series and I was reading this comic at the same time, and I superimposed his voice onto Nick Fury, and it works really, really well. Like, he has this like growly, barky Klingon voice that I think, for whatever reason, like, it works really well for this Nick Fury, because he's always making these like really grand pronouncements.
Right.
I just imagine that all comic book characters are voiced by Sean Connery. I don't know if that's weird.
A little bit.
It says a lot about how much I love Supergirl and Batgirl, but I just think he's the perfect voice for all comic books.
Sean Connery doing Supergirl would be a trip.
I mean, I just picture...
It just sounds exactly like Sean Connery.
Don Adams.
It's not even pitched up or anything.
And sometimes Chumley. Yeah, Tennessee Tuxedo.
Don Adams.
Get Smart. Nothing.
Are these words? I don't understand what you're saying.
Anyways.
I really
from a bygone era? What is... Did you find these in a time capsule, Joe?
You hate everything old.
Anyways.
I just like Joe to feel upset at life.
I'm okay.
That's what I like.
No,
That's what I like.
I'm totally okay now. It's okay. I'm at peace. I'm okay. I know goddamn well you know who fucking Smart is, all right? I know you did, because they made the remake of the fucking movie.
Did they make a remake of Get Smart?
Yeah.
I remember the original Get Smart.
Steve Carell, yeah.
It was Steve Carell. It was actually pretty funny. Alan Arkin was in it. Or it's Adam. It's Alan Arkin.
Yeah.
It's Alan Arkin. His son is Adam. Anyways, yeah, I mean, it's really well done, and it never feels heavy-handed, and it never feels like you said about, like Tobias said about being shoehorned in there. It all feels it has a very good flow. And I was funny because I was sitting there and I had a friend over, was visiting me, and I was like, hey, I have to read this. And he's like, well, that's fine. I'll entertain myself or whatever, they watch TV. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how slow it is at the beginning. And then you get to like issue 6 or 7, and all of a sudden you realize that you're just devouring it page after page, because all of a sudden, like all these little plot threads that he's laid out have come to a head, and the shit is on the line, and everything's coming to a head, and it's impressive how it builds in that really subtle way.
I also noticed for the first time this time reading it that the page count of each comic was different, because I read it as a trade. The first time I read it, I had the hardcover, and this time I read it as single issues digitally, and the first like 2 issues are like 36 pages each, and then the middle ones are all like 22, like a standard comic, and then the last 2 are like 36 again. So I think it's interesting that he was able to there was so much information to get you set up that he didn't want to leave you feeling short in those first couple issues.
Right.
Actually, he talks about that in the afterword.
Oh, really?
As well. Originally, it was supposed to be 6 36 page issues, which is like 216 pages. And at a certain point, they said, okay, no, it's going to be 8 22-page issues, which is like 186. So like somewhere in there, basically, he had to cut like 30 to 40 pages of material out of the comic. And so like he was rearranging things and dropping plot lines and all of this stuff. Like, it was very hectic. He talks about this in the afterword, and I actually have to give him like a lot of respect for the story being as coherent as it is and not feeling like it's missing anything.
Yeah.
Like he definitely could have done a lot more with this setting.
Yeah.
And it's obvious that he wanted to do more because there are characters that are outright, I feel, missing from this story.
Yeah.
I really wish that Hawkeye had been in this because I think he would fit perfectly into that
this
milieu.
is like the perfect
Yeah.
Hawkeye story.
Well,
But it was still incredibly good for what it was with the length that he had to work with.
even some of the characters that are already in there, I would have just liked to see more of. Like Banner, for example, we see as the Hulk in one panel.
Yeah, and there's actually the one inconsistency I can think of, and maybe it's not even so much of a consistency as at the end where he saves Peter. It just seems kind of, there's never any kind of development in between them. So it's kind of...
It's kind of mirroring Bruce Banner saving Rick Jones.
Right, Rick Jones.
Yeah.
Who is seriously like the most accident-prone person ever.
But we don't really know anything about Bruce Banner in this series. I mean, he's kind of the herald, standard bearer, whatever, for King James.
Right.
And we don't really get a sense of who he is outside of that other than that he's going to kill Nick Fury.
Right.
And also that he is the one who gets Peter and, like, is trying to convince him to kill Fury. So, like, maybe in some way he feels responsible for, like, having him there.
Yeah.
And, like, that's why he decides
we don't get a good look at his motivations.
Yeah.
Also, I love all of the spider teases in this book.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
The 5 or 6 times Peter, like, finds a spider and it's like,
Yep.
oh, this is where you get spit, and it doesn't happen.
One of my favorite parts, actually, is kind of near the beginning. There's as part of a conversation, Nick Fury takes a spider from Peter, and he's talking about, finding Peter, and he's like, oh, that was so long ago, before you're not part of your time.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that as he's taking the spider, and it's like, he knows that this is the moment that Peter is not supposed to be bitten by the spider.
I think, was it Stephen Strange that was saying
Yeah,
that?
it's Doctor
This is
Strange.
Doctor
Oh, Strange.
Yeah, because he's got, like, a magic spider in his house.
Yeah.
And it was, like, given to him by someone or something, and he was like, oh, it's before your time. Or not in your time.
That actually reminds me of something that I meant to look up and didn't get around to. So, spoiler warning if you haven't read the book, which you should have.
Yeah, I put a spoiler warning at the beginning
I like
of the episode.
I like to give extra special spoiler warnings for big stuff. But
Okay. It says warning right at the beginning.
Yeah. So Donald Blake, he has the staff that turns him into Thor.
Right.
And he brings that golden orb as a decoy. Mm-hmm. Is that supposed to be a particular object from the Marvel Universe? Because I get the sense that it is. But we don't really find out what it is or what it does.
I think not. I think it's supposed to be like part of a real world mythos. Like, as in that is what people think the actual Templar treasure is.
Almost like an Ark of the Covenant or something.
Yeah,
I did the same thing. I looked it over and it didn't look like anything that I was familiar with.
Because
the Gauntlet.
For example, in Assassin's Creed, they play off the Apple of Eden,
right,
like part of the Templar treasure, and I think there's like some real world lore that is like there is a golden treasure.
Although now that I am talking about it, I just want to mention the whole there's a number of really cool reveals in this.
Oh, dude, that's
comic, and the Donald Blake reveal I think is my
so
favorite.
Good.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite.
I read this back when it first came out, and so I had forgotten significant chunks of it. Like, I forgot who the old man was, and when I think it's Strange calls him Donald, like, I was racking my brain, like, okay, who is this? I should know this.
Totally.
And, like, I stopped reading while I thought about it, and when I realized what it was, I just got this huge grin on my face, because I remembered how awesome that scene was.
Yeah.
I remembered it, like, halfway through, and the funny thing is, I kept having to remind myself that this was not Shazam. I kept wanting him to be like the wizard Shazam from DC. It's not even the same universe. And then I'm like reading it. I'm like, oh shit, Doom's got the treasure. Oh, wait a minute. I remember. And it was like, yeah.
It's great.
That's a great moment.
It's been like, it's got to be close to like 7 years since, or like 6 or 7 years since I've read this. And I didn't remember it at all. So when he gets the staff out, I'm still like,
You're like,
what
what is
What?
he? It's Iron Fist. That's who it is.
No, I wasn't that far, but I was just like, it took me until literally he was like getting the staff. And Daredevil's like, I could have got you a stick. And he's
Yeah.
like, no,
Not
not like
this
this.
one.
And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah. Because I have never really read a lot of the Thor where Donald Blake is a part of the mythos, right? Like, I haven't read all of Walt Simonson's run. I've read bits and pieces of, like, old Thor mythos, but I'm not a huge old school Marvel guy, so I kind of forgot that was even a part of his mythos.
Well, I think Walter Simon.
When Walter Simonson took over Thor,
he's done.
No, it's like the first issue of his run. He's like, okay, Donald Blake is not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Like Thor is Thor.
And then it opens up with one of the greatest things ever, which is the fight between Thor and Beta Ray Bill, where Beta Ray Bill totally like fucking schools his ass, and Odin's like, yep. Guess you're Thor now, and Thor's gonna like, but what about me?
One of the things that I really appreciate this is that when people do kind of like Elseworlds, like reinterpretation of a character, they often make the characters kind of like reminiscent of, but not exactly like their counterparts. Like I read Marvel Noir over the summer, and a lot of those characters are not true to their counterparts. Right. Noir Luke Cage doesn't have bulletproof skin. I forget some of the others, but Wolverine like doesn't have a healing factor. Like he has knives that he holds, but like he's not Wolverine. Like it's kind of a reinterpretation of character. And Neil Gaiman doesn't do that. Like all of these characters are very true to who they really are.
Yeah.
Well,
like the Fantastic Four have all of their powers. All of the X-Men mutants have all of their powers. Like Magneto is Magneto. Like he is his character, and they don't try and like mitigate it or reimagine him within like the milieu of the times. Like they really are themselves.
I think what's really interesting about that is that this isn't a Marvel what if. Like this is part of the Marvel canon.
Yeah.
Like this is very much Neil Gaiman playing on that whole something we talked about during S.H.I.E.L.D. and something we've talked about during other episodes, like when we mentioned the Eternals and stuff, that there is a grander scheme. Oh, Earth X is the other one I'm thinking of. Like there is a grander scheme for the Marvel Universe, and it's a lot of it revolves around the fact that Steve Rogers is supposed to be at a specific place at a specific time, and if he's not there, then shit goes wrong. So this is very much that, where they're like, oh, we'll just send him back in time, and because he's there then, the Marvel Universe starts in a time it's not supposed to have started in.
Right.
And this really did remind me a lot of Earth X.
It does.
In tone.
Yeah.
More than anything else.
As in certain plot beats, too.
Like, it takes that very, like, introspective tone
it's
that
got
Earth
the
X takes.
Anytime the Watcher is around, it, like, always
anytime
reminds
the
me
Watcher,
of
the
stuff
Fantastic
like
Four are imprisoned, the Watcher, but also in the idea that there is a seed in the Marvel Universe that is what sparked everything.
Right.
And how in this, it's Steve Rogers. Spoiler alert.
Wow.
If you can't figure
fucking warning at the beginning of every episode.
This is the first time I've read this book before, and the first time, like, I was talking to Kate about it last week when we went home, and he's like, well, as soon as I read his name, I knew who he was. And I'm like, I really didn't catch that.
Well, I got the fact that he was supposed to be Captain America, but I did not realize that he was the Captain America, not like the 1602 version like everybody else is. Like he is Steve Rogers from the 20th century.
Right.
Like that's one of the other big reveals.
And that reveal was my favorite. That was
that's
one
a
of my
great
favorite.
reveal.
I really like that one as well, although it's not my favorite. What do you think about this, Maddox? You've been pretty quiet. So
well, I'm trying not to jump in over anyway. I have a tendency to talk over people if I get excited.
That's how you get word in edgewise.
So yeah, a couple notes. One of the first ones is at first when I was reading it, everyone did feel beautifully in character. I was super loving it, except for at first I was like, wait, Daredevil is way too lighthearted, way too happy-go-lucky. And then I realized, wait, this is, Gaiman going back to the characterizations of his childhood. So this is pre-Frank Miller Daredevil. I actually loved Miller's run on Daredevil. I love a lot of the Daredevil stuff. But one of my complaints, just as a reader of Daredevil, is Miller came along, and I feel like guys that did great runs after, like Brian Michael Bendis and Ed Brubaker, they didn't do Daredevil. They did Frank Miller's Daredevil. Yeah, they did. And so there were certain tropes that they always hit on after that fact. And so going back to the singing minstrel Matt Murdock, I actually was super in love with it. I liked seeing him more lighthearted, Matt Murdock.
I actually have not really liked Daredevil since Frank Miller took over.
I like it, but I think, and I've said this before, the character has a place. You can't. Frank Miller writes Daredevil. That should be Frank Miller's Daredevil. It's that the people have been aping that run for fucking 20 years.
All right, so we had a minor technical error there, but we're back. Eric, what were you saying about?
So I was saying one of the things that threw me off at the first read through was every other character seemed like they were spot on. The characterization that I know and love, Spider-Man, all the characters except for Matt Murdock. He seemed way more kind of happy-go-lucky, more lighthearted than the Daredevil that kind of I knew and loved and grew up with. But then it hit me since Gaiman was going with the 60s iterations of the characters, from his youth. That was the thing. It was, I know Frank Miller's Daredevil, not the Gene Colan kind of era, the Stan Lee stuff. And so, I'm used to this dark, brooding ninjas, Kingpin, Elektra, like
Prison.
Heavy Catholicism, like I hate my life, like I don't even want to be a superhero. Everyone I love dies. That's the Daredevil I'm used to. And this guy was singing the ballads of the Fantastic Four, and I absolutely loved him in this story, and he was probably my favorite character. And that was, to me, the biggest trip.
And I really love the way that they introduced you to the Fantastic Four through his ballads.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For like 5 or 6 issues before you actually even get introduced to the Fantastic Four themselves.
Yeah.
Like there's a long period of the story where you only hear from them by repute, and everybody's like, oh, the Fantastic Four are dead. Like they're not around. And so that's another reveal in this story. Like, oh, look, they're still alive.
Yeah, I definitely got the sense at first, like, oh, are they actually not in this story? Is it just this, like, urban legend? And then, slowly through the story, that was definitely one of the things that I loved best.
I also wondered on this particular read-through, is the implication that throughout this entire story that Sue Storm is naked?
Mm-hmm.
Because her silhouette looks very naked.
There's no unstable molecules for their outfits.
Right.
I'm going to push up my glasses. You can't see that in audio land. But in the traditional Marvel Universe, Reed Richards developed clothing for all the Fantastic Four because you can't turn into fire and have your clothes not burn off your body, and you can't turn invisible and have your clothes go invisible with standard cloth, and Mr. Fantastic can't stretch and have his clothes go with him, except if you have these unstable molecules, which I was actually talking to someone the other day about how much of a dick Reed Richards must be, because the Fantastic Four have these like magic clothes, basically, that if you turn invisible, they go invisible with you. If you light on fire, it's flame retardant. But then you see Spider-Man in the basement after a fight with Doc Ock, and he's like commenting on how smelly and nasty his costume is, and he's like literally sewing it up, like, this is so, and like, I'm poor, man, and I can't believe I gotta sew my costume up again. And Reed Richards could be like, dude, this is for you, all you guys on Civil Molecules Fire costumes. Like, no, it's just my thing.
I was under the impression that he did that. I thought Reed Richards gave other people, like he gave the Avengers unstable molecule.
He probably did the Avengers since they're like
and I
government,
know that when Johnny Storm was dead and Spider-Man was on the Fantastic Four, he had a costume that actually changed colors.
In the Future Foundation. Yeah. But
so
at that point, it felt like you earned it
between
since you
his costumes.
Yeah.
Which was nice. One other point that I wanted to note real quick. One of the parts that I really liked about Spider-Man 2099 is like at the very first issue, he makes a comment about how he was at the Day of the Dead in Mexico, and he wanted something like really durable that wouldn't get torn. So he bought an unstable molecule outfit, just like off the shelf. Like,
Nice.
oh yeah, a century from now, like you can just buy these.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like I always thought that was a really nice, just like a little note.
What was the connection? And this is kind of off topic, but this came up a couple of days ago for me. The connection between unstable molecules and Pym particles. Wasn't there a connection there somewhere?
I don't think so.
I mean, they have to be somewhat related because Pym particles are like, they have to do with rearranging size of molecules and things, right?
Yeah, so they'd kind of serve the same purpose, at least for something like Reed Richards, where they'd have to expand and contract.
Right.
I haven't read enough Fantastic Four or old school Avengers to blurt out issue numbers or whatever, but I'm sure there's some connection.
I thought I read about them being mentioned in the same, in kind of the same, in a similar context, but that could just be me. Like, my brain is.
Well, what did we read something recently? You and I think, where we were talking about Pym particles, but but I don't remember what it was. So maybe if we could remember.
Yeah, I
what book that
can't.
was.
We'll have to think about that.
Anyway, I just imagine that they're like so expensive that Reed's gotta like lock the patent down on those for a while, and like that's how he pays for living in a basement with a huge beard for like 6 months out of the year. It's like he's still living off that unstable molecule patent money.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember what I was reading, but there was something just recently with the Fantastic Four where they were talking about one of Reed's inventions. And he's like, oh yeah, blah, 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 like wants me to like monetize this and get it on the market. And I keep trying to tell him like every single one of these things costs $2 million. Like, no, like the world could not afford to mass produce these things.
Yeah.
Like I make 3 of them ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And we all know that's because 2 of them are inevitably going to be broken in some kind of strange plot device occurrence that so only the one left.
Which is addressing, I think, a legitimate complaint that a lot of people have made about like, oh, there's all this super science in the Marvel universe, and why don't they share it, like wipe out hunger and all these things? And it's like, well, just because you can do this in a lab in a very unsafe, unstable way doesn't mean that you can necessarily mass produce it.
It's like the terabyte camera. It's like that exists,
right?
But like you and I don't have one, and we won't for like a long time because
you
like,
don't. Oh, yeah.
We can't afford. We just can't afford to like pay the $1 million it costs for that camera.
Yeah, it's like,
but,
we have
the military's got them.
We have stem cells and 3D printers, but I can't fucking print myself out a heart today. Like
Tomorrow,
maybe in
though.
another 50
You
years.
can't. I did before I came out tonight.
Joe's got
Joe,
6 hearts
you
now.
don't have
He
a
just
heart.
Keeps adding them. It's like kidneys. He doesn't take
I'm like
one
the
out.
Midnighter. I've got like 3 of everything.
So how do you guys feel about the art in this?
That was actually something I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Cade, and I'll bring up my point later.
Okay, I actually have a story from the early 90s when my brother Adam and I were kids. We actually collected the X-Men trading cards. I mean, they weren't all X-Men, but they were called Marvel X-Men trading cards.
I still have them, so I said, I think.
And one of the things that was always cool to us was when we pulled a card that was drawn by Andy and Adam Kubert. Those were always our favorite art. So
No, Andy Kubert was one of my favorites growing up, and I remember reading this, and it's funny because Andy Kubert in this, Greg Capullo in Scott Snyder's Batman run, his art is amazing, and these are guys that were doing it back in the day whose styles have actually like evolved and changed over the years. Whereas if you look at Jim Lee, he's drawing the exact same characters he was drawing in 1994.
And the same designs.
But it's the
exact
same
same
thing
designs.
that I say about Jim Lee, though, is like you look at Jim Lee's the X-Men #1, the book that he's famous for, and what ages that book isn't Jim Lee's pencils, because Jim Lee's pencils were so modern that book looked amazing. But what makes Hush look good, in my opinion, is how far we've come in terms of inking and coloring.
Well,
because the coloring on that book, and I cannot right now off the top of my head remember his name, but he colors all of Jim Lee's stuff, and I should fucking know this name. It drives me crazy that I can't remember it right now.
Scott Williams is the inker on everything he does. Like,
It's
spacing on the colors.
It's
Scott Williams.
Alex Sinclair. Alex Sinclair is a phenomenal fucking colorist, and he makes Jim Lee's art look goddamn modern. And the Hush uncolored, or what is that? The pencil?
The Unwrapped, or I think it was called. Yeah.
When I heard that was coming out, I was like, this is
And
idiotic, because what makes that book look so modern is the colors and inks that go over the top of it. There's a scene where Alfred is like operating on Batman, and there's all these like green floaty panels that are all over the place, and in that unwrapped, it's just empty. Like it's just, he's just there. Like the colors inkers added like so much depth and atmosphere and lighting to those scenes that they are like really astronomical. And it's something that I think about when I think about guys who were doing it back in the day and are still doing it now. Is like they were so far ahead of their time. We were just waiting for computer technology to catch up to where we could color and print in a way that would like really complement their style. I have a great book, Kirby King of Comics, and it has Jack Kirby's pencils in it. And oh my fucking God, they're unbelievable. And it makes me so mad that all of that work got destroyed essentially by inkers because they used to ink right over the pencils. And it's not the inkers' fault. I'm not blaming them. It's just that was how the industry worked.
Back then. Yeah.
And if we had those pencils now, like what modern inkers and colorists could do with Jack Kirby's like original line work would be phenomenal. So I think it's very similar. It's like these were guys that were doing it back in the day, but their pencils were so far ahead of their time that they still look. You could put it out on the shelf today, and it would look fantastic.
Marvel actually did that with Mutant Genesis. That first 7 issues, they did. It's prohibitively expensive. I think it's like $50, but it's called X-Men Mutant Genesis 2.0, and they took that original 7-part story and they did digitally recolor it, and honestly, it does look really, really great. Yeah. I actually don't like it because I like the book as it looked, even though it is very dated. Like, you know, when I read it back in '91, that's how I want to see it, and it's got a lot more depth and shading to it, and it looks fantastic. But for the older style stuff. But it's totally what you were saying.
And I think that in this book, Isanove, who colors this book, right? It's
digital painted.
He takes this stuff to a whole nother level.
God, the color in this book is insanely good.
Well,
you
guys
talking about
Dark Tower, the Dark Tower stuff. He's done all the colors,
digital
on all
painting.
Of that, and
Richard,
it looks fantastic. No inks. It's just pencils and then digital coloring, no inks at all in the process.
But I want to take a second and talk about somebody what really floors me about the art in this book, and it's the covers by Scott McCowan. That are made to look like woodcuts.
No, they're not made to look like.
Are they actually woodcuts?
It's not. I don't think it's actually woodcut, but
I mean, it's absolutely
God, where is it?
Astonishing.
It's scratchboard, I think. But basically, it's like. It is cut into a piece of like slate or something like that.
Oh, see, I mean, it looks like what printing, like that kind of, this callback to very early, like printed art. And it sets the tones so nicely, and it's so painstakingly done. I mean, the art in this book is excellent, and it makes it, the character designs are one of the things that I feel bring everything together for me. It would have been really easy, I feel, to go wrong with the character designs in this book. But I feel like Andy Kubert really nails it. And of course,
one of the things that I noticed this time through is that in all but a very few panels where the art is intentionally different, there's these like lines that go from top right to bottom left. Just in the background of every single panel.
It's meant to look textured.
Right, and it does give it this really interesting textured look. And I totally didn't notice it the first time I read this story. And it's really visible on certain panels more than others.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there was something more to it, or if it was just trying to make it look like it was printed on like really old parchment.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that it was like trying to add a layer of depth to the art, but there definitely could have been some more thought involved. I think that some of the panels in this book pack infinitely more punch because of the colors.
Oh, yeah.
The scene where Doctor Strange's wife, Cleo, is flying up to take his head off the spike, and the background colors are like very rainbow-esque and supernatural. And at the end, when they're opening the gate, the time gate
when she opens the door into her own world or whatever.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That panel is excellent.
Yeah, there's so much good coloring going on in this book.
The coloring's totally different on that panel. It looks like Ditko. It looks like the 4-color. It's like she busts through like a fourth wall and goes to Ditko.
And when they're doing the Captain America flashback for
that's brilliant.
It's all of that halftone.
Yes.
They play with a lot of stuff in this book, and it works really well.
Yeah, I love every time Doctor Strange is like astral projecting and his fingers get really long. I don't know why I like that so much.
No, because it's a way of kind of injecting you in there. I think this book does a lot of little things that are really important in keeping that. You have to invest a lot in the story in the beginning because it starts off rather slow. It's not a typical. It's not the stories you would have been reading these characters in the 60s.
No, for sure.
You would have been they would have been a lot more action packed. So you have to put a lot in there, and I think Neil Gaiman is really good at that slow build, and I think he gives you it's very much like I've done I've done the description of what Brant Eddy, who's a sometime contributor on this podcast, talks about Grant Morrison, and reading Grant Morrison's more like crazy stuff where it's like you go to his house and he sits you down and you're having tea with him, and all of a sudden that's when he decides to tell you he just took mescaline and he's going to be tripping balls,
tea or whatever,
and you're like, oh my god, but like, you know, Neil Gaiman tells a story. He's like, come in. And then he tells you the story, and you don't even realize it until halfway in that he's been telling you the story the whole time. And you're totally like wrapped up in it. That's how good he is.
The thing that Neil Gaiman does well is subtlety.
Yeah.
And like there's subtlety throughout this book. I was just looking through it a little bit and noticing like those lines that I was talking about are present within the 1602 scenes. But like when you get that little window into Clea's world, like there are no lines in that world. When you go to Uatu on the moon, there are no lines there. Like it's just this subtle little background element of the story that doesn't add anything specific, but it contributes to the overall whole in this very subtle way.
Yeah, and I think another thing that Gaiman just does really well is that storytelling through world building. It's like he's building a world, and in the process of building the world, he's also telling you a story. It's what I appreciate about the early Sandman issues, even though they're like sort of rough sometimes. It's like he's taking you on a trip through a world, and in that trip through the world, he's also trying to tell you a story too. And so many authors will try to do one or the other, but not both at the same time.
Absolutely.
And it's just such a skill and balancing act to be able to like pull it all off.
Oh, so good. So much goodness.
I just love that there was that scene towards the end where Reed said to the Thing, he just basically, that's the closest thing to Sandman, because it's not like Sandman at all, other than suddenly you had the moment where it's like, this is about the story. It even says, well, I could cure you, but I feel like it wouldn't last for long because it wouldn't serve the story. I love that personally.
That one page really struck me as weird and out of context with the rest of the story.
See, I don't think so, because Reed is kind of like, you know, he's got this incredible scientific mind, but he's got stuff that he was doing, few instruments in which...
Right, the thing that he was doing earlier where it's like, he's talking to Otto von Doom and he's like, I think that light must have a speed. Wouldn't that be marvelous?
Yeah. But there's this moment where he's talking to Ben, and he's like...
It's when they're on the ship.
Yeah, they're on the ship, and he's talking about the stories and how important the stories are. And Ben's like, can you cure me? And he's like, I'm sure the natural sciences say that we can, but I don't think we'd ever be able to, because you're far more interesting as a story this way. Mm-hmm. And I thought that this was this really kind of meta moment.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he, at that point, understood that they were out of time, out of place, and it was his idea of setting the story right was getting them back into the proper time, but maybe not discussing it in so on-the-nose scientific terms, waxing more philosophical.
Yeah. Yet I posit we are in a universe which favors stories, a universe in which no story can ever truly end, in which there can only be continuances. If we are in such a universe as I hope, then we may have a chance. And the Thing says, Reed, you spoke of transmutations. Can you restore my humanity? I have been a monster too long. And Reed's response is, in truth, I do not know, my friend. The natural sciences say yes, a cure is possible. But the laws of story would suggest that no cure can last for very long, Benjamin. For in the end, alas, you are so much more interesting and satisfying as you are.
Which is pretty meta when it comes to the Marvel Universe, because Ben's been changed back and forth a
few times, yeah.
Well, the current status quo, as I recall, is that he can now be human for one day every year.
Yeah.
But he only ages one day every year on the day that he's human. And I guess there was an issue at one point. I haven't read it. I think it was during Hickman's run, where it's like showing the Thing through the ages, and he lives for like thousands of years.
Yeah,
it's
aging like incredibly
him and
slowly.
Franklin, because Franklin is basically ageless and immortal, essentially, according to his
Franklin's
power set.
Like the most
it's a brilliant issue of I think it was of FF, not Fantastic Four proper, if I'm remembering correctly. But it was brilliant.
Well, the old FF is different from the new FF.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Although I like the new stuff too, but I loved Hickman's run. He actually got me reading the Fantastic Four religiously for the first time ever.
I've been reading his new stuff on the Avengers and really digging it. I'm actually
all in my file. Love it.
Positively anticipating Infinity, which is the first time that I positively anticipated a crossover event in probably 10 years.
In his entire life.
DC, you should learn from Marvel's example.
Yeah.
You should learn from the good Marvel. Don't learn from Ultron War.
Age of Ultron.
Or Old Age of Ultron, because that was awful.
That's
apparently.
actually something that we were talking about in the car on the way over here. Was I'd made the comment when I first read this. It was about 9 years ago when the book first came out. The thing I like is, even though it does kind of leave you hanging, and there have been follow-up stories to this, miniseries. I feel like if this had been a Marvel event now, it'd be something like Age of Ultron, where it's like there's 5 ongoing series that launch out of it and another event out of the book.
Yeah.
Like they can't contain themselves, where this was allowed to just be.
Yeah.
Although they did do a few follow-ups to this, none of which were nearly as good.
Well, none of which were
Not
written by
Gaiman.
Gaiman.
Yeah,
No.
that's understandable.
But it's unfortunate because, it is such a rich setting
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love
because
to
of the way
see
that
him.
Gaiman presents it. As I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, I would love it if there was some way to mash this up with Game of Thrones. Like, just the combination of Marvel 1602 and Game of Thrones struck me as incredibly potent.
There are definitely moments that have that feeling when they're bringing Doctor Strange out to the block. And there's that moment of
Yeah.
like powerlessness where you're like, fuck. And it's a very similar as, and like the 3rd season of Game of Thrones just went off the air. The books have been out forever. So if you're pissed off about this spoiler, I have no pity for you. It's very similar to Ned Stark, because you watch it happen and you're like, oh, we could save him. We could get it. And he's like, no, he's got a very clear, I think it's better because Strange has a definite reason for wanting to be in that position.
Strange does
But
it on
still, it's an
purpose.
incredibly powerless moment for you as the reader, because you're like, well, that sucked. That was like not cool. Like, you want to punch James in the face at that. You're just sitting there like drinking his wine, like, look at me, I'm hot shit. And you're just like, oh, I'll punch you.
King James is definitely a cockbag in this entire series.
He totally, yeah. He
Which is
totally
what
is.
you need out of your villain, for sure. If you don't hate him, you're not
Yeah.
doing it right, for sure.
And he's evil, but he never feels cartoonishly evil to me.
No mustache twirling.
Yeah.
I also like that there were a lot of the character origins that took place in this, as opposed to before this. Like Bruce Banner becoming the Hulk happens in this book. Count Von Doom becomes Doctor Doom in this book.
Yeah.
He gets disfigured in the book.
Peter
Yeah,
Parker
well,
finally gets
which
bitten by
is-
the spider.
At the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
like-
so while it's going on, there is some of that. The origins have already happened, and some of them are still happening.
Right.
And it's awesome to see that. As
Well,
you go
and
through.
what I never got before, and what I realized this time, is that what the head watcher gives Uatu at the end is that universe. He's preserved it.
Yeah, no, that's the whole point.
Yeah, no,
and then the little afterword where the universe still exists.
right. No, absolutely. I haven't read this for about 5 or 6 years, so
Actually, the thing that I really liked, and I don't know if I got it the first time or not, was the fact that Angel is gay in this.
yep.
Yeah.
And like that whole thing with him and Jean Grey and Scott Summers is very Shakespearean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's weird too, because I just watched. I finally got around to watching Paranorman with my daughter the other day, and it's your pretty standard. Like, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. But one of the characters is Norman's friend. I can't remember his name. He's got an older brother. He's like this hunky jock type dude, and Norman's sister is crushing on him throughout the whole movie. And at the end, spoilers. There, I've given you time to turn it off. At the end, she's like, we should go to the movie sometime and see a movie or something. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's great. You'd love my boyfriend. He's totally into chick flicks. And I was like, oh, that was cool. There's just like this little moment. There's not a lot of fanfare around it or whatever, but it's just, I was like, oh, okay, cool. That just happened.
Yeah,
So-
I love the subtlety of it in this, but I also I totally agree with Toby that it was like very of the era, like very
Oh, no,
Shakespearean,
absolutely.
like romance triangle, and it didn't have a lot of time to develop because it was such a background story, but it
Well,
was given
yeah.
enough time to be meaningful.
And I think it did the same, because this was a love triangle that existed in.
Oh, yeah, I actually just last year finally read the initial 66 issues of X-Men before they got canceled. The X-Men that most people aren't thinking of. Most people think, Wolverine and, the new X-Men era. But the original 5, and yeah, they were all in love with Jean Grey. All of them. And it was actually kind of silly because they'd all fight over her tooth and nail. And again, it was So I love the twist in this for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, it's funny because I like Jean Grey from that era a hell of a lot more than I've liked her from any other fucking era.
The hothead personality wasn't seen in this. Yeah, Jean Grey has shown, at least for the last 20 years or so, is just kind of brash, cocky, loud, like almost unlikable in some ways. And
well,
that's when
ever
she's
since
not.
she got the Phoenix Force.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, is she the Phoenix,
Yeah.
right? And then there's that. The Dark Phoenix is one of the Marvel's most heralded stories, and I do enjoy it. But the thing I hated is like you couldn't distinguish the two after the fact. It's like
Right.
the Phoenix was supposed to basically, taken over Jean Grey, but it wasn't Jean Grey. It was supposed to be something else, and then they kind of retconned it later, where it's like, no, Jean Grey actually was like put in a cocoon, like under this lake, and it was actually Phoenix pretending to be Jean Grey for all this time, which Marvel and X-Men especially is full of all these mind-numbing retcons and
Well,
time
Especially
travel
when it
things.
comes to Jean Grey.
Yeah, and
Well,
Jean Grey,
clones
yeah.
and
Jean
her-
Grey and Wolverine are both. That's just like you would have writers come in and be like, "This happened," and then somebody would be like, "No, that was." And Wolverine's Wolverine's case for like 20 years, it was memory implants. That was just another memory implant, Wolverine. That never happened. It's like, and to this day, that's why I can't care about Wolverine as a character,
that's
because
a very Cold War kind of thing.
yeah. Oh, absolutely,
Memory
absolutely.
implants?
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's
I thought
very
you meant
like
Wolverine for a minute, and I was like,
Well,
it's like
Wolverine
the,
is
like
too,
it's,
you
it's
know.
very The Prisoner. Like you
Yeah.
don't know what's going on and who
Yeah.
to trust and what's real.
Yeah.
Like everything's a trick.
Although one of my favorite, it's funny because Wolverine is, I always enjoy him more when, I mean, one of the things I've enjoyed him in most is there was a story I read where he was in World War II with Captain America
America.
and Nick Fury, and they were
Yeah.
and they were
Uncanny
fighting
X-Men
together.
268. Yeah.
That's impressive right there. I can't fucking
with
do it.
with a young Black Widow as well.
Yep,
Yes.
yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because she's hella of old, isn't she?
The best part is Cap saying, "Hey man, you want to team up?" And Wolverine saying, "No, I don't need a sidekick." That's the best part. Yeah, that's the
Yep.
best part.
That is an excellent,
One of the single best Marvel issues of all time. I think it's so good.
It's great.
Brilliant.
It's a great.
Brilliant.
I'm glad you knew what I was talking about because I would have no fucking clue.
I
what
knew that
it
it
was.
happened.
Yeah, I
not
remember reading
what
it.
issue it was in though. So do we have anything else to say about 1602?
Read it.
Yeah.
Don't expect it to pop from the beginning. Like, give it a chance.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
definitely something that you really have to give time to grow.
If
Yeah,
you love
for
Gaiman,
sure.
definitely read it. If you like Marvel, definitely read it. If you've never read Marvel before, maybe read a couple Marvel books
Yeah.
first, because it's nice to like have some context for some of these characters.
You'd enjoy it more if you'd read
Yeah,
some
so,
other.
I mean-
If
nothing
you've
as such.
seen enough of the like if you've seen the X-Men movies, if you've seen the Avengers, if you saw the first Fantastic Four movie, like I think you'll have enough of a grasp of the universe
Yeah.
to appreciate this.
So I would definitely recommend it to people who are fans of Marvel and fans of Gaiman, and even just literary comics in general. Like,
Yeah.
if you've never read a Gaiman book before,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
if
fine.
you liked Earth X, which we talked about,
Yeah.
you'll
That's
definitely like this.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Is if you like
or
Earth X,
Earth
you'll
X,
like
or
this.
the Eternals, or
meta stories in general.
Shield, or like any of that world building Marvel stuff
Right.
that we like. All right, recommendations. Who wants to go first?
Let's have our guest.
Oh, Eric, do you
Our
want? Yeah.
special guest go first.
I thought you guys would appreciate this one. I brought Old City Blues. It's by Milo Giannis, the penciler on Prophet, which I know you guys covered and is one of my personal favorites as well. This started as a webcomic. I'm really in a cyberpunk phase right now. I've been reading a lot of William Gibson. So this is just where I'm at right now. If you love Blade Runner, that kind of thing, it's, doesn't rip it off, but it's certainly familiar enough that you would love it. And again, you'd be familiar if you've read Prophet with what the style of pencils would be like. Black and white story. It is free on his website, but this little yellow hardcover is just such a beautiful presentation, and it's like $15, so it's totally affordable. And I think it's fantastic. We just ordered a bunch at the shop, and I've already sold out of all of them, and I keep getting more. I think it's
Oh,
really,
wow.
The
really gorgeous.
artwork is beautiful.
Pretty.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've read Prophet, you've seen his artwork, and this is, I think, in some senses more detailed.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little bit heavier on the manga influence.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
But
definitely.
it looks really cool.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be a future Greece, since that's where he's from, but it looks, very, very kind of Neo-Tokyo kind of, which is definitely intentional.
As a fan of Akira, I'm looking at it and I'm like,
there's definitely an Akira
wanna
vibe.
read it.
There's definitely an Akira vibe for sure.
Yeah.
And this is a really nice, this is a good hardcover.
It's
again,
Arcade
Arcade
Press.
Press.
Yeah, they
We've been
make
talking about that for,
physically
3
very
weeks.
beautiful books.
Yeah.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah, no, they make amazing stuff.
They also they're like one of my favorite people for import books too, because like The Killer, they're the ones that translated that into English. Like they've been doing so much good. Like
They just released an omnibus of that for the first 2 volumes.
oh really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome. So for my book this week, I brought Samurai, Heaven and Earth by Ron Mars and Luke Ross. This was published by Dark Horse in I want to say 2005, 2006. And it's the story of a samurai. He's in love with this princess. His clan gets wiped out by a Chinese warlord, and his girlfriend is kidnapped and sent to Europe. And so he sets out on this epic quest across Europe to go and find her and bring her home again. And he ends up going to Paris and running into the Three Musketeers and getting into all of these fights. It's not the most intellectually stimulating thing that I've ever read, but it's really well done. The art is absolutely beautiful. It's Ron Mars. It's generally well written. It's fun. There's a sequel which I haven't read because minor spoiler alert. I guess not everything gets resolved in this one volume. It's an ongoing series. It's something I picked up kind of
volumes though, right?
There's supposed to be a third one which has not ever been released.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It might yet come out, but it's something I picked up on a whim a number of years ago, read, enjoyed, and it's just been sitting on my shelf ever since then.
Yeah, I really like this series as well. I think I've read both of them, and the art is amazing in this.
It's really
enjoyed
beautiful, really detailed. It's got a very oil painting look to it.
Yeah,
It does.
and it's something that scratches that samurai itch that you have, without being supernatural, very supernatural.
Yeah, it's very historically grounded.
Yeah, because other samurai books that I would totally recommend, like Oko or even Usagi Yojimbo, are very heavily influenced by supernatural or whatever.
Well, I would say
think-
folk tales.
Yeah, folk. Yeah, exactly.
Usagi Yojimbo runs into monsters and demons and ghosts and
Oni
stuff.
folk demons and stuff.
Yeah,
But I mean,
that's supernatural though, right?
yeah, I mean,
what's
I would.
the difference
Yeah.
between folk supernatural and ghosts? 'Cause
I
isn't
think
that
the
a folktale?
tone.
You
I
really?
think the tone. I never feel like the tone of Usagi Yojimbo is really supernatural and
They're demons and
yeah, but I mean,
undead
I
and-
think there's a tone for supernatural stories that's
is
scary
it just
and dark.
Western versus?
I mean, it could be. It's a
Eastern?
very East. There's much more because Stan
he-
Sakai is doing a much more Japanese thing than he's
Yeah,
doing.
because I would call that supernatural. Onis, I would call supernatural.
Yeah. I'm talking about. I mean, I just
And
to
even
me reading
Hellboy,
those stories.
I call that supernatural.
I
and those are,
I would say Hellboy is definitely supernatural, but
Okay.
I
was
guess
just curious. This is
when
just
somebody
me
says
splitting
supernatural, I
hairs.
associate it with
Like
modern
horror,
supernatural,
yeah.
vampires and werewolves.
I don't,
okay.
and I don't
Well,
necessarily.
those are folklore. I just I'm splitting hairs. I know I'm being devil's advocate. I was just curious
Well,
what
yeah,
how
no,
you guys
I
divide.
No, I
understand
mean, I
what
guess
you're
I'm
saying.
splitting hairs too, because
I
when
feel-
somebody says supernatural, I think of urban fantasy, urban dark fantasy, stuff, modern day.
Yeah, okay. I
I
can
feel
see that.
more like the atmosphere of the when somebody says it's a more supernatural story, I'm like, oh, it's a much more atmospheric horror kind of scary story
I
than
just mean there are supernatural elements at work there.
No,
I mean,
absolutely,
I could call yeah.
no Usagi
No, I got you.
definitely
So,
faces his share of Oni and shit that he's
Yeah,
got to
I
fucking
was
cut
just
down in his
Curious.
mission.
I was just curious how you guys approach that. But.
So, what did you bring, Cade? I ask as though I cannot see it on the table right in front of me.
I'm sorry, I zoned out when you guys started talking about the splitting hairs and whatnot. I
Good
just went
response.
into tune everybody out mode.
That's a good.
Yeah, right.
This week, I brought a book that Joe has talked about bringing a couple times, and I have yet to see him bring it. So.
I talked about bringing
No,
it too.
Oh, that
I
was
don't think I've
Chard
ever
then.
talked
Maybe it was
about
me.
bringing that. I
Yeah.
think it was Chard.
It's just being
But
weird.
this is Joss Whedon's Fray.
Future Slayer.
Yeah, written by Joss Whedon, art by Carl Moline and Andy Owens. It takes place in Manhattan, like 300 or 400 years from now. It's kind of like a reboot-ish of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But yeah, it's basically 400 years in the future. There's a new Slayer, and the world is just completely different than it is now. And so it's just
sort of steampunky also.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
very.
if you're a fan of the series, I think that comic actually features that weird pokey axey thing.
Yeah.
That is like
It
the
does.
Slayer's chosen weapon or whatever.
The weapon from the final
That-
season of Buffy is in the
It
comic.
showed up in the comic first and then was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Right.
if
And
I recall correctly.
And I read this as someone who had never seen Buffy, and I've still only ever watched the first season, and I'm not a Buffy fan.
You don't
First
have to
season
be.
was bad,
I
so that's
love-
why.
And I love this comic. So even if you're like, yeah, Buffy the Vampire, like, give it a shot. It's cool. It's like futures and vampires and monsters and hunters and strong female characters and like a lot of stuff I like about comics. So I recommend this too, kid. Anything else you want to? Art's awesome also.
Yeah, it has very comic booky art.
It does.
Yeah, if you like, yeah, I guess I shouldn't say that the art is awesome, but if you like a little bit more cartoonish comic book style stuff, it feels very reminiscent of Dark Horse in the era that it was printed. It was like kind of that house style, if you remember those older Star Wars
The
books a
coloring
little
in
bit.
some of the shots really remind me of Fear Agent as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because sometimes they're like really detailed backgrounds and sometimes it's just like a white panel or like it's orange. It's just a field of orange that they're
Yeah.
standing in like mysteriously.
Yeah, I think that was kind of that.
John Byrne School, right?
Well, Dark Horse had this kind of house style for a while there in the like late 90s, early 2000s that I really remember from the Star Wars comics, where it was like very similar. Like sometimes the comics would be like very detail colored, and sometimes only the main characters and the action would be colored, and then everything else would just be like green. Like even the starships in the background would just be like a green color, and you're like, oh, I guess this just budget cuts because
Yeah.
you know it's how do you get an
Can't
indie
afford
book?
special effects.
How do you get an indie book out? Sometimes you have to cut corners somewhere, and it wasn't really to the detriment of the book at all. It was just like, you know, it was very clear that this was not colored at the level of like the maximum cost colorists, you know, the high price get paid a lot of money guys. So, but I really like the art in this book. Kate, anything else you want to say about this one?
No, I think I'm good. I'm a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Huge fan of Joss Whedon in general. Huge fan of this book. Had to bring it since hasn't been yet.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to back up your threats.
Yeah. I keep thinking about bringing it and then finding other stuff. I'm like, ooh, I haven't talked about this yet.
I've literally had a comic in my bag for the last 3 episodes that I keep meaning to talk about and keep finding other things I want to talk about more.
Yeah.
So what do you bring, Chard?
Oh, should I go next? Okay.
Yeah.
I bought a book that I read a long time ago and I reread today because I was gonna read the sequel to it technically, which isn't really a sequel. It's just like one issue and then the 4th issue and then some side issues, and that is Blacksad by I'm gonna butcher these names. Juan Diaz Canales and Juanjo Guarindo. I'm sorry, apologize. That was terrible, but Blacksad is crime fiction, detective, gritty, noir story. But all of the characters are animals, similar to in some old Disney movies like Robin Hood, where like all these human characters were essentially just represented by animal characters, and it's never addressed. It's not like Elephant Men, where it's like there are animal characters and there are human
So
characters.
it's like Usagi Yojimbo, where like
Yeah.
Usagi's a rabbit and his buddy is a rhino, but they're not like a rabbit and a rhino, like they're humanoid creatures.
Right.
Like
I
it's
can't remember if
anthropomorphic.
there are humans in Usagi because I
There
haven't
are.
read.
No, there aren't.
Yes,
Are
they
you sure? Yeah,
There's
because Usagi.
one panel in one issue where there's one person who is human.
Okay.
The main bad guy.
Sort of. I mean, he hasn't ever been seen since, and he's not the major antagonist. Like he's this kind of omnipresent, like dark force that occasionally shows up. But
The most I know about Usagi is from when he crosses over with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and like the Mutanimals and stuff. So like those guys are what I think of like in Elephant Man, where it's like these are these have been like mutated into humanoid monsters or creatures.
In Usagi's world, they're all
anthropomorphic animals.
And this is the same way. It's like he is a mountain lion type thing, and his police chief is a dog, and there's a bartender that's a pig, and there's just it's there's gorillas and whatever. They're just animals. And that's never explained. So just like you got to get that into your head first. But the story is like a very adult, gritty, dark crime fiction story. Like people die, there's nudity, there's a lot of blood. He gets the shit kicked out of him a lot. Very much in the classic style of like a Marlowe or like Spencer style detective comics. If you like stuff like L.A. Noire, if you like stuff or not L.A. Noire, L.A. Confidential.
Right.
The movie L.A. Confidential, not the horrible video game L.A. Noire. If you like that movie, if you like Maltese Falcon, if you like what's the first Marlowe? Farewell My Lovely's the second one.
No, it's The Big Sleep.
Big Sleep. If you like stuff like that, like this is right up your alley. It's got the detective style narrative boxes where he's in his head, and the stories are really good. They tackle a lot of really gritty stuff, and they're able to do it because they're animals. They're able to do it in a way that kind of like takes it out of our modern setting. Like there's a lot of the second volume deals entirely on race murders and like race kidnappings, and it's like because they are like polar bears versus like a crow, it's easier to kind of like talk about that issue at a distance, but it covers some like really dark material. And the art in this book is absolutely fucking phenomenal.
It is pretty.
This is what I would call like the European style presentation. And I think they're European. I don't actually know anything about the authors.
I believe it
but
is,
it's come out over the course of like several years. Like it takes multiple years for each issue to come out. Because it starts in 2005. The fourth issue came out in 2010. So like they take their time, and the presentation is excellent. The art is fantastic. It's like it looks painted and colored, and the story... each issue is an individual case, and they're long. They're big fat issues. They're probably like bigger than Prestige format issues, and they're really good. Like each case gets solved in each issue, so it's like a really fun read. And for someone who loves crime fiction and just loves comics and art and just this kind of storytelling, it's very cinematic and it's very fun. I love the shit out of this book, and I forgot how much I enjoyed it. I knew that I liked it, but I should have brought it a long time ago.
Nice,
and it's really great. So Blacksad.
Awesome.
By Dark Horse. And it's a great, beautiful hardcover, too.
Yeah. I want it now.
Joe, what did you...
I brought Mark Waid's Daredevil. It's the hardback, so it collects a little bit more than the first trade does. I think it create the first 8 or 10.
The first 10 plus the .1 issue.
Yeah. It's the first 10 plus the .1.
Yeah.
We're
talking to a real expert here.
It's
like almost like you do this for a living.
I know.
So this is Mark Waid's run on Daredevil, and I'm not going to go too deep into it. We talk enough about it. This is brilliant. This is how Daredevil should be written. This is an example of writing great Daredevil stories that have nothing to do with Frank Miller.
Well, it very, very clearly at the beginning of the run, it's like no more being sad.
There's this great scene between Foggy and Matt in the beginning where, and I'm paraphrasing here and I've done it before, but Matt and Foggy is kind of like, I don't know, Matt, I don't know. And Matt's like, Foggy, I've been in a dark place lately, and I'm done with all that now. And he is. It is
fun really
to
great.
Read. It brings back,
and it just keeps getting better. They're up to issue, I want to say like 26 or 27 at this point.
29.
Yeah, 29
came out.
And I'm not gonna talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. But there's a new character that's introduced named Ikari that I absolutely fucking love. Like I love the design. I love what the character represents. Like everything about it is good. Daredevil is one of the comics that I anticipate the most each month, which is saying a lot for somebody who doesn't read a lot of superhero comics. Like superhero comics are not where I'm generally at. And Daredevil is very high up there on my list of things coming out right now.
Multiple people have told me this is the best Marvel comic coming out right now.
It's brilliant.
It's one of them. I mean, Mark Waid has an an understanding.
And that's not an
superheroes.
easy title to get. Marvel is putting out a lot of really good stuff
we've
right
talked
now.
about Hawkeye, and that's still good. I just read volume 2 of that recently. It's awesome.
Even stuff that used to be kind of like, I don't want to say boring, but like Fantastic Four and Avengers were not very interesting for a long time, and now they both are really interesting.
Wow.
The stuff that they're doing on X-Men is really interesting.
Oh,
They've
I
got
know that,
Daredevil and Hawkeye, and the Superior Spider-Man stuff is really, really good. Like I came into that, like I read the first issue of Superior Spider-Man expecting it to be awful. Like I was reading it so that I could talk about how bad it was. And it wasn't. It was really good, and it's continued to be really good.
Yeah.
And I know Toby doesn't like it, but the Kelly Sue DeConnick's Captain Marvel, I think, is excellent.
Captain America, since Rick Remender jumped onto
Yeah.
it, has been great.
That
Like
book
that
is
whole
controversial,
storyline.
But I've heard nothing but good things from my friends.
I'm a sci-fi guy.
Yeah.
Like when you take Captain America and you send him to Dimension Z, I'm fucking sold on
Yeah.
that comic book.
Yeah.
Well, it's him as a superhero right now instead of as like a covert spy like he was for a while.
The big
Yeah.
complaint from the haters is it's not Brubaker,
Right,
but,
which I'm totally fine
well,
with.
yeah, and that's that.
Yeah,
If that's the complaint, because it's from Remender, and I think Remender's pretty great from what I've
Yeah.
read. It
How
took me about
many-
8 issues. No, I love it.
How many years did Brubaker do at Captain
years.
America?
8
8 years?
years.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good run.
Yeah.
You've had your time. You can always go back and read those issues.
Well,
Let's do
and
something
7
different.
Exactly,
of those years
exactly.
were like identical. It was pretty tough to hang on through all 7 of those years. For me,
When they
I think.
relaunched the book the last time, I think he should have jumped off, and that was like about 2 years.
And this
So,
this kind
They
of
kept
brings me full circle to what my point is, which is it's all well and good to have a celebrated run on a comic book. I think there are runs on certain comics that make, like Ron Mars had an excellent run on Green Lantern, made Kyle Rayner Green Lantern, my Green Lantern anyways.
Yeah.
I was a Hal Jordan fan until I read those books, and then I realized Kyle's where it's at. Like Kyle is the Green Lantern, and he's earned it.
And you're not talking about in the time, like you've gone back and read.
No,
read those issues.
definitely. I read them as they were coming out, but I've gone back and read them as an adult. I think that's all well and good, but I don't want every Green Lantern story to be
Ron Mars.
You know, I love Frank Miller's Daredevil. I think it's some of his strongest writing. I like it better, and I'm a Batman freak, and I like it better than Year One. To be
Born Again
perfectly
is
honest,
probably the
Born
best thing
Again
he
is
ever did.
fucking
Yeah.
amazing, but it's not the only Daredevil story to tell.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of. I've read Brubaker's run, I've read Bendis's run, and I'm tired of reading Frank Miller's run again and again.
Yeah.
And so picking this up, and especially Daredevil is one of my favorite characters, and I think he gets pissed on a lot. To pick this up and read this just meant the world to me. As somebody who reads comic books because they rekindle that feeling of what it was like to be young and be like, yeah! Mark Waid nails it. He nails it, man. He does not miss a beat, and he totally is aware of what he's coming in after, and he totally doesn't care. He's very upfront about this is where we're going to do now, and this is what's going to happen, and it's a good thing, and it's the best thing to happen to Daredevil in years. And
This is one of those runs that people are going to remember.
absolutely,
for a
this is going to go
long
right up there with his
time.
run on the Flash and his run on Impulse.
Oh
and,
yeah.
Well, I mean, this is going to be like
Justice
up there
League,
with the
yeah.
Walt Simonson's Thor,
Yeah.
I think, in terms of like these are classic runs that everyone
Oh
remembers.
yeah, no.
Redefine
20
the
years from now,
character.
people will be like, when people are getting into comic books and they go, "What should I read?" They're going to say Mark Waid's run on Daredevil. That's
And
how good it is.
For me, as someone who's never really been a huge Daredevil fan and like hasn't been exposed to a ton of Daredevil, like it was so easy for me to get into.
Absolutely,
Same
That
here.
that's another
Makes it
huge
totally
strength.
accessible.
I had never read Daredevil before. I started reading Mark Waid's Daredevil. I loved it. I went back and read the Frank Miller Daredevil to get a grounding in the character. I liked it. It was pretty good. Frank Miller, I don't think is ever exactly my speed.
Yeah,
But this just stands up on its own. Like if you have never read Daredevil before, you can pick this up,
Yeah.
up from context some of the important facts. Like, hey, he went through a really dark period in his life,
Yeah.
and like he's a lawyer, whatever. Like,
You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
and really get on board with it without too much like pre-launch like figuring shit out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it just the art is amazing. It's
Every artist is fantastic
Yeah.
in that book. He brought the A game with Paulo Rivera, Marcus
Well,
Martin, and Chris Samney doing the current stuff.
yeah. Paulo Rivera does this cover, and it's Daredevil, and he's got his cane in two separate pieces, and the cord is surrounding him, and he's got one of the pieces of his cane in front of his eyes, and then the whole city, and it's him around a cityscape, but the entire cityscape is made out of the words that each thing is. And it's so beautifully, I don't understand how you could see that and not want to read that book.
There's a lot of really incredible panel work representing the way that he perceives the world.
Yeah.
And it's
Because they like show him perceiving it through sound and smell and taste in a way that a lot of people don't.
They kind of like, for a long time, were writing Daredevil like he was just, he just knew everything, like almost like he was psychic.
Yeah.
And this does a good job of like showing some of the faults in his perception.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like the way that he perceives the world is a very important part of this book.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and it's a hugely
And the
important
character.
part of
But
who he
let's
is.
let's not get too deep into that, and instead we should vote on what we're going to read.
What are we gonna read? Yeah.
Cade, what do you want to read this week?
Daredevil.
All right.
I'm going to vote for Old City Blues because I love me my Euro comics.
Yeah. Eric, what do you
I'm gonna go Blacksad because the Daredevil stuff's fantastic. I love it, but I've read it. I will certainly reread it if that's the case. But Blacksad I've never read. I've actually heard from several people that it is absolutely fantastic and it looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
As much as it breaks my heart to do, I mean, I can't vote for my own book. I'm going to vote for Blacksad.
That's rough because I really wanted to vote for Old City Blue, but as the traditional tiebreaker.
See, I was really hoping that Joe would vote for something else so that Shard's vote would actually count for once.
Well, I got one episode where my vote counts.
Okay, so you were sitting over there thinking I was going to vote for one of the books that didn't have like crime fiction as a description of it, because then you have just not been paying
Yeah, I
attention.
just brought this
I know,
only for
right?
Joe. I brought this book for Joe. I
I
was
was
like,
like-
Joe, have
Yeah.
you read this, Joe?
No, I haven't.
Really?
And I did not want to read it when you started talking about it. I looked through it for about 5 seconds, and then
Yeah.
I was like, no, this is what I'm voting
Yeah,
for.
I don't. For some reason, I don't know why it never occurred to me to talk to you about this
No,
book
this
either.
I want to read this.
I'm gonna vote for Samurai Heaven and Earth because I actually really enjoy that book and I think people should read it, and it's great.
Okay.
And also that keeps a tie from happening,
Yeah,
as I
it
do
does.
every week. And
So,
like every week,
we
read
will-
all the books because it's a great collection of books this week. Like,
Yeah, it really,
really-
is.
it
Like
really
we've got
is.
so many different genres represented.
Yeah,
and
we
I-
all kind of went.
of
in
the
different
ones I've
ways.
read, the only one I haven't read is Old City Blues, and of all the ones I've read, they're fucking phenomenal. I would totally recommend to a lot of people. So
Absolutely, and I want to read Old Silly Blues because City Punk or Cyberpunk is like only slightly below crime, like
Well,
noir.
You had me at
fiction.
Giannis,
yeah,
Milano Giannis.
I saw one
I
panel
figured that
of
was
art.
going to be a good one to get you guys.
I
since
saw
you were
one
so into
panel.
profit, yeah.
I saw like one panel of art of like a mech robot thing, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm totally in."
All in, all in.
All right,
and this is online on a website.
It's yeah. If you just Google Giannis's name, he's got a site and it's all free. It's a webcomic. There's actually more than this.
Well, I know what I'm doing tomorrow.
yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next episode. And thanks to the Outhouser.
TheOuthousers.com.
All right, Outhouser.com
for hosting us,
for
and
putting us up there. And
thanks
And-
to Eric Mannix for
Yeah.
coming out and on a Thursday night.
we'll get you on another one.
Thanks
for,
for
sure.
having me, guys.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah,
It's a
and
blast.
read Blacksad.
And
read-
Blacksad for
read
next time.
everything,
And
but-
also keep in mind to continue to be reading Empowered for the long run, which we've still not decided when that's coming out.
Probably like the beginning of October.
Yeah, it's
I'm
coming
going.
soon.
I'm going to guestimate the beginning of October.
So I'll read them
Yeah.
all the last week of September.
Yeah, sometime late September, early October, we're gonna record that, so it should come out around then also. So, all
Good deal.
right, keep reading that, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Bye.
We need a catchy
See.
sign off.
That was a catchy sign.
Fuck you,
Okay.
Joe. Episode over.
Thank you, Joe. Episode over.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
That's a
sign
good
off.
one.
All
That's
right,
a good one.
bye everybody.
Good night.